We live in a world where everything is about us. But the more we focus on us, the more we focus on our fears, our pain, our problems. What if we changed our focus? What if we lived generously? The generous life.
Good morning. Have you ever been just totally oblivious to something? I remember I was at the church office, I guess it was about the middle of the day, and I looked down and I had two different brown dress shoes on. I don't know how I missed this. I don't know why I put on two different brown shoes. Evidently I was in the dark when I was getting dressed. I don't know. And another day I ended up wearing a shirt inside out. The whole day I got home and one of my family members said, "Hey, did you know that you had your shirt inside out?" I was so embarrassed. I can't believe that no one told me or no one noticed one way or the other, but pretty embarrassing. There's been other times that I've been driving around with my family and they'll say, "Hey, did you see this or did you see that?" I'm like, "No, I didn't see that." I think many times we're not aware of the things that are going around us. Sometimes we're too busy talking. Sometimes we're too busy thinking about other things. Sometimes we're too busy on our phones for us to actually know what's going on. Today, we're starting a series called The Generous Life, and we're talking about the role of awareness in generosity. And I think sometimes when we think about generosity, we think about money. But generosity is not limited to money. Of course, does money play a part in generosity? It can. But there's many different ways that we can be generous. We can be generous with our words. Proverbs tells us that our words can bring life or death, that they can bring healing. And so we can be generous with our words by encouraging others. We can be generous with our time by taking time for people, by stopping and sitting with people. We can be generous with our attention. Many times we're so busy that we don't actually take time to be fully present. We can be generous with our belongings. We talked about this a few weeks ago, but most of us, we have a lot of stuff. And we can share our stuff. We can give away our stuff. We can be generous with the things that God has given us. And so I want us to think about all the different ways that we can be generous. And generosity isn't limited to money. Generosity, you don't have to be rich to be generous. Actually, generosity is for everyone. Generosity is for everyone. You know, the only requirements of generosity is this. I want you to write this down. It's not very complicated. Identify an opportunity and take action. Identify an opportunity and take action. And then when we do take action, chances are there's going to be a great impact. There's going to be a great impact. And so the pathway to a generous life is awareness, action, and impact. And over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to talk about that. And I hope during this series that God will challenge you to be generous. I hope that He'll transform your life, and I hope that He will use our church to transform other people's lives through our generosity. So today, as we talk about awareness, I want you to stop and think about the many things each of us experience on a daily basis. The sights, the sounds, the tastes, the touches, the smells. We're bombarded with all of these, and many times we're not even aware of them. I mean, science tells us that we even have things going on while we're sleeping, that our senses never stop working. And so our brains are going and they're sensing different things, but many times we're just not aware of them. I want us to stop for just a moment, and I want you to do this experiment with me. Who are the last 5 people that you've talked to? Think about this. And what did you talk to them about? If you're anything like me, that's pretty hard to remember. You think, oh, okay, well, I think I talked to this person. But we have all of these experiences, but many times we're not even aware. They're just kind of passing moments, and we're not even aware of what's going on. And even though we may not be aware, when I look at the life of Jesus, He was someone who seemed like He never missed a moment. I notice about Jesus is that He was a noticer. He noticed situations. He noticed people in need. He noticed blind Bartimaeus. He noticed the Samaritan woman. He noticed Zacchaeus. He noticed the bleeding woman. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 5, verse 21. Now, here's a little context of what's going on here. We see that Jesus has healed a demon-possessed man. It was a very intense moment. He gets into a boat and goes to the other side. and there's this crowd that's around him. And immediately there's this local synagogue leader named Jairus, and his daughter's very ill. And he asked Jesus to come to his house so that his daughter can be healed. And of course, Jesus goes with him. And so Jesus is on a mission to heal this daughter, Jairus' daughter. But that's not where the story ends. In the midst of this story, something else happens. In verse 25, it says this: a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She would have been an outcast. I don't think she would have been able to go and worship because of this bleeding. A lot of people may have not wanted to be close to her. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors over the years. She had spent everything she had to pay them, and she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had went to all of the doctors. She had tried everything, spent her money trying to be healed, and she wasn't. Verse 27, she had heard about Jesus, so she came up from behind through the crowd and touched his robe. And she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. And immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. After 12 long years of trying everything, and she finally gets healed. But she slips into the crowd, and she makes this bold decision. If I can just touch Jesus, maybe he will heal me. And she's restored. Now, here's what's interesting that I don't want us to miss. Jesus was on a mission to go heal this young girl who was sick. But in the midst of being on this mission, another opportunity arises. And let's see how Jesus responds. Verse 30. Jesus realized at once that the healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?'" I mean, there's people all around us. I mean, we're all being touched. He's just like, how are you noticing this? And verse 32, it says, but he kept on looking around to see who had done it. In verse 33, then the frightened woman, trembling, came to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." Can you imagine when she thought that no one had noticed that she had done this, and then Jesus noticed and turns around and says, "Hey, who did this?" I'm sure she had to be scared. But one of the things that I noticed in this passage is that Jesus demonstrates remarkable awareness. Even in the midst of a large crowd, even in the midst of going on a mission to heal another girl, he notices someone else needed healing. And he actually took time to speak to this lady. And I think the disciples, they asked the same question that we asked, like, Jesus, how were you able to do this? I mean, how are you such aware of your surroundings like this? Because I think many times we struggle with awareness. Many times we're running from appointment to appointment. And we're pulled in all kinds of different directions, and we fail to notice people, and we fail to notice the needs of others. And in the process, it robs us of being able to be generous. So let me give you one principle about generosity today. Awareness activates generosity. Awareness activates generosity. And so the first step to generosity is to become more aware of what's happening around us. People who are successfully living generous lives seems to have their antenna up at all times. My youngest son, Ellison, man, he has an amazing antenna when it comes to being generous. We'll be coming into a store, out of a store, and he'll notice an elderly person who's struggling loading their vehicle. And he'll stop and say, "Hey, can I help you load this?" At school, he might see a teacher carrying some heavy items. He'll say, "Hey, let me take this." I've seen him do this at Castle Hills many times. If he sees someone hurting or struggling with something, he wants to step in. He just has an ability, his antenna's up, just looking for ways to serve and to be generous. And I've learned so much from him by that. So how can we become more aware? How can we have more awareness? I think one thing is for us to slow down. And we've talked about this throughout the year, but so many times we're running so fast that we just don't notice what's going on. And so I want to encourage you to slow down and to think and to look around and look for these opportunities for us to be generous. Secondly, I think we will need to ask God to help us notice the needs around us, to give us opportunities for generosity. So we want to slow down and we want to ask God to show us and to give us opportunities. As we end today, I want you to pray this prayer. Would you repeat this with me? I'm going to say it one line at a time. Pray this prayer with me. I want to experience the joy. Say this. I want to experience the joy that comes from being generous. I ask that today an opportunity to be generous will come my way. I ask that today an opportunity to be generous will come my way. That I will recognize when it does, and that I will have the courage to jump in and give. So let's all be looking around for opportunities to serve. Look for opportunities to be generous.